She never expected anyone to notice, until one small note changed everything. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I truly love seeing how far these stories travel. The hospital lobby was always cold in the mornings, not because of the air conditioning, but because of what lingered in the air: worry, waiting, weariness. People came here with tight chests and tired eyes, some hoping, some grieving, some just enduring. And then came Grace. Every Wednesday at 8:05 a.m., she walked through the glass doors holding a bouquet of tulips. Always tulips. Sometimes yellow, sometimes pink, sometimes deep red, depending on what the flower shop had. She didn't wear a uniform or a badge, just a soft gray coat and a scarf she'd had for years. She never said much when she arrived, just a small nod to the security guard, a quiet good morning to the receptionist if their eyes happened to meet. Then she'd begin her walk. One stem in the elevator corner, another tucked beside the water cooler on the third floor, a small vase placed gently in the pediatric waiting area, where tired parents rarely looked up from their coffee. Grace had no clipboard, no agenda, no reason to be there, really, at least not when anyone asked about. She didn't volunteer through a program. She wasn't part of a campaign. She had simply started showing up one day, months, no, years ago, and never stopped. To some, she was a mystery. To others, a passing smile. To the nurses who saw her regularly, she was simply the flower lady. No one questioned her, and that was just the way Grace liked it. Because for her, this wasn't about recognition. It wasn't about being thanked or remembered. It was about moments. Tiny, gentle moments in places filled with pain. If a single person paused and noticed something beautiful in the middle of a hard day, that was enough. She never stayed long. By 8:45, she was usually gone, like a whisper. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, is that someone had started watching. And next week, that someone would leave behind something that would make Grace stop in her tracks. Grace didn't remember exactly when she began. It had started with one visit, years ago now, when she came to see a neighbor who'd been in a car accident. The hospital had felt heavy. Everything was gray. Her friend had cried softly, holding her hand, and Grace had felt utterly helpless. On her way out, she'd stopped at the gift shop and bought a single flower, a tulip. She left it on the window ledge of the ICU waiting area, where an older man sat alone, eyes closed and hands trembling slightly. She never saw him again. But the next week, she brought another flower, and then another. Over time, it became her rhythm. Wednesday mornings, one bouquet, different colors, no name, no purpose, just beauty quietly placed in overlooked corners. Grace never expected the flowers to matter. Most were taken by cleaning staff by the end of the day. Some were moved to nurse stations, some tossed out with the trash. That was okay. Her offering wasn't about permanence, it was about presence. And still she came. She knew the layout of the hospital by heart now, which elevators were slow, which machines beeped too loud, which waiting rooms needed color most. She'd smile when a child giggled at the pink petals, or when a tired nurse offered a small nod of thanks without stopping her stride. Once she passed by a woman who was silently crying in the corridor. Grace had paused, gently handed her a purple tulip, and walked away before the woman could even look up. A week later, that same woman was waiting near the entrance. She didn't say a word, just held up a coffee and offered it with both hands. Grace had accepted it with a tearful smile, and they never spoke again. It wasn't about the conversations. It was about the gestures, the quiet ones, the ones that didn't ask for anything in return. Grace lived alone now. Her children had moved to other cities. Her husband had passed 5 winters ago. She found peace in simple things: the warmth of tea, the rhythm of early walks, the smell of fresh soil from the florist's shop. And on Wednesdays, she gave that peace away, one stem at a time. She didn't know that someone had begun counting the tulips, noticing the colors, wondering who she was. She didn't know that her silent gift had taken root in someone else's heart. But that was the thing about kindness. You never know where it lands. It was subtle at first. Grace had passed by the hallway near the ICU dozens of times. It was usually quiet, an empty corridor lined with vending machines and mismatched chairs. People didn't linger there unless they had to. But one morning, as she placed a yellow tulip in a plastic cup near the wall, she sensed someone watching. She turned slightly and saw him, a boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old, sitting on the edge of a chair too big for his frame. His backpack rested at his feet, worn and faded. He had shaggy, dark hair and a stillness to him that felt older than his age. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked at her with a kind of cautious curiosity. Grace gave him a small nod and continued her routine. The next week, he was there again. Same spot, same silence, same backpack. This time, she gently placed a pink tulip a little closer on a table near the chair across from him. Still no reaction. He simply stared, then glanced away. Grace wondered if he was waiting for a sibling, a parent, a friend. She didn't ask. She never did. But she noticed the small things, the way his legs swung slightly when he thought no one was looking, the quiet way he picked at the edge of a snack wrapper without opening it, the way his eyes followed her as she made her rounds. Each week he was there, always alone, always at the same time. And each week, Grace placed the tulip a little closer. One morning as she approached the vending machines, she saw him already seated, backpack unzipped, notebook in his lap. But his eyes flicked up the moment she came into view. She gave him a gentle smile and set down a deep red tulip in a small vase. For the first time, the boy's gaze lingered. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. Grace hesitated. "Good morning," she said softly. He didn't reply. That was okay. She knew some silences weren't cold. They were just waiting to feel safe. As she turned to walk away, she heard the faintest sound, a whisper. "Thank you." She didn't turn around. She just let the smile bloom across her face, as soft and quiet as the tulips she left behind. It had been raining that morning. Grace walked in with her usual bouquet, white tulips this time, the petals edged with a faint blush of pink. Her scarf was damp, and her shoes left tiny squeaks on the hospital floor as she moved through the now familiar path. When she reached the hallway near the vending machines, she paused. The boy wasn't there. His chair was empty, the backpack gone, the space strangely hollow without his quiet presence. Grace hesitated, unsure whether to place the flower in the usual spot or move on. She set the vase down gently on the side table and gave it a small turn so the bloom faced outward, as if still performing for an unseen audience. Then she saw it. Tucked beneath the vase, almost hidden against the dull laminate of the table, was a small envelope, cream-colored. No name, just the faint impression of graphite on the front, as if written and then erased. She looked around, no one in the hallway. Grace picked it up and opened it with careful fingers. Inside was a single piece of lined notebook paper, folded twice and slightly wrinkled. The handwriting was uneven, slanted, and written in pencil. There were only two words: "Please don't stop." Her breath caught in her chest. She read it again and again. "Please don't stop." The weight of those three words sat heavy in her hand. All the morning she'd questioned whether anyone noticed. All the weeks she'd thought maybe this was silly or meaningless. All the tulips that had disappeared without comment. This note was small, but it echoed louder than any thank you she'd ever received. Grace sat down on the nearest chair, envelope still in hand. She didn't cry. She just sat in stillness, letting the moment bloom quietly around her like the petals she carried each week. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. She didn't know who had left the note, didn't know what prompted it, didn't need to, because whoever it was, they had felt something, something that mattered. And now, so did she. The following Wednesday, Grace returned with tulips again, this time pale orange, their soft color bright against the gray of the hospital floor. But this time her steps were slower. She wasn't just placing flowers anymore. She was looking, not obviously, not with suspicion, but with careful, gentle observation, the way she had learned to notice when someone needed quiet comfort. The boy wasn't in the hallway. She paused by the vending machines, set the tulip down in the usual place, and waited for a moment. Nothing. At the front desk, she asked a nurse she had spoken with before, "Excuse me, the boy who usually sits near the ICU on Wednesdays, dark hair, small backpack. Do you know if he's still coming?" The nurse looked up from her clipboard, her face softening. "Oh, you mean Lucas?" Grace's heart tugged a little at finally hearing his name. "He hasn't been around the past couple weeks," the nurse continued. "His sister, she passed away." Grace's breath caught. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "She was here for months," the nurse said gently. "He came with their grandmother every week. They said this place was starting to feel like home." Grace nodded slowly, eyes distant. She had never asked, never pried, and yet somehow she felt the ache of it like a silent thread that had snapped without warning. That night, at home, she placed the note back on her kitchen table. "Please don't stop." She stared at it for a long time, the words somehow heavier now. Not just a thank you, not just a kind whisper, a plea, a quiet voice asking the world to stay soft, even when it didn't deserve to be. The next Wednesday, Grace arrived empty-handed, no tulips, no small vases, just herself. She sat in the boy's usual spot, same hallway, same squeaky chair, and for the first time since this all began, she stayed. Not just to deliver beauty, but to absorb the silence. She didn't know what she was waiting for, but something in her said, "Just be here." And maybe that was enough. The hallway was quiet. Grace sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the vase that still held the orange tulip from the week before. Now wilted, its petals curling inward like it, too, was mourning something. She didn't bring new flowers that day, not because she forgot, but because it didn't feel right. Instead, she brought something heavier than tulips. Grief. A quiet kind of grief, the kind that doesn't scream or break things, but lingers in the chest like a soft pressure that won't let go. Around her, life moved on. Doctors walked past. A nurse gave her a small nod. Somewhere down the corridor, a baby cried. But in this corner, the air stood still. She remembered the boy's eyes, the way he never spoke until the day he finally did, the way he watched the flowers as if they were something from another world. And now he was gone. Grace closed her eyes and leaned back. Her scarf was loose around her neck, and her fingers rubbed the fraying edge she always meant to fix but never did. She thought about how many people had sat in that hallway, how many people never left with the ones they came in with. She didn't know Lucas's grandmother, didn't know his sister's name, but she felt the shape of their absence like a shadow stretched across the floor. She wished she had said something more. But then, again, what could she have said? "I'm sorry. I'm here for you." Would it have mattered? Maybe not. Maybe what mattered was that she had shown up, that every week, without needing a reason, she brought something alive into a place filled with uncertainty. But now she wondered if it had been enough. A young woman passed by, holding a stack of patient forms. She paused, glancing at Grace. "Are you the flower lady?" she asked gently. Grace looked up, startled. "My dad used to wait here before his chemo appointments," the woman said. "He always looked for your flowers. Said it made him feel like someone out there still cared." Grace smiled faintly, heart aching. "Thank you," the woman added softly, and disappeared down the hall. Grace sat very still. The ache was still there, but it was joined now by something else. A flicker of warmth. A small reminder that kindness leaves traces, even when words fall short. That night, she didn't sleep well. She kept hearing the whisper, "Please don't stop." And when morning came, she didn't hesitate. She didn't grab flowers. She grabbed a notebook. Grace returned to the hospital the following Wednesday with no bouquet in hand. Instead, she clutched a small spiral notebook, worn and soft at the corners, the kind with a cardboard cover and faint blue lines inside. She carried it the same way she used to carry her tulips, gently, as if something inside might break if held too tight. At the vending machine hallway, the chair was still empty, but the old tulip was gone, cleared away, perhaps by a cleaner who never knew the story behind it. Grace sat down, opened the notebook to the first page, and wrote carefully, "To the boy who watched the flowers, I noticed you too, and I still do." She didn't sign it. She tore the page out, folded it once, and tucked it beneath a clear plastic cup on the side table. No fanfare, no explanation, just a note for someone she wasn't even sure would return. Then she waited for a few minutes just in case. No one came. Still, she felt lighter as she walked out of the hospital that morning, like something long buried inside her had finally been set free. A week later, she returned. As she entered the hallway, her heart skipped. The plastic cup was still there, but the note was gone. In its place sat a piece of white printer paper, cut into a clumsy square and folded in half. She picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside was a drawing. Two figures, stick people, one tall and one short, stood beside a tulip almost as big as they were. Above it, in uneven handwriting, "I didn't know grown-ups could care like that." Grace covered her mouth with one hand, eyes glistening. There was no name, no date, no return address. But it didn't matter. The boy was still out there. Or maybe someone else had picked up the thread. Either way, the silence had broken. She sat down and began to write again. The next message was shorter. "We're never too old to need kindness." The week after that, someone left a poem, then a small paper crane, then a scribbled "thank you" in red crayon. One day a nurse added a folded note that simply said, "Today was hard. This helped." The table by the vending machine slowly transformed. No longer just a place to pass through, it had become a quiet exchange. A space where strangers traded softness without names, without voices, just handwritten proof that people were still paying attention. Grace still brought tulips sometimes. But now she also brought paper, because words had become the new bouquet. The table in the hallway near the vending machines became something of a secret. There were no signs, no official name, just a clear space that grew week by week, quietly, steadily, into a resting place for people's hearts. Grace no longer walked in unnoticed. Nurses gave her soft smiles, sometimes slipping her folded scraps of paper from their pockets with quiet nods. A janitor once left a tiny origami swan on the table. A young father began leaving little doodles of robots and dinosaurs, signed from Josh, age 6. The notebook she brought filled quickly, so she left a second one labeled in careful handwriting, "For whoever needs a moment." It wasn't uncommon now to find someone sitting in the chair where Lucas once waited, not crying, not talking, just reading, writing, breathing. One woman left a message that read, "I don't know how to say goodbye to my mom, but thank you for this space where I didn't have to pretend." Another wrote, "Today was my last treatment. I survived, and this table was part of how I did." Grace read each message slowly, never rushing. Sometimes she replied. Sometimes she let the silence answer. And sometimes, when the hallway was empty, she sat with her hands folded and imagined that Lucas might still be out there, drawing superheroes or writing another simple note. Maybe he'd walk by one day and see what had bloomed from his first folded envelope. She didn't need to know for sure, because this wasn't about closure. It was about presence. Gentle proof that in a world that often rushed past the hurting, someone had chosen to pause, to notice, to leave something behind. One day Grace arrived to find something new. A small wooden box sat on the table, placed neatly at the center. It had a glass lid, and inside were dozens of folded notes, some colored, some torn from notebooks, some typed. Next to it was a card, the kindness corner, open to all. Grace blinked, her chest full and aching. She hadn't named it, but someone else had. And now it was no longer hers alone. It belonged to every tired soul who had wandered those hospital halls and found, in a hallway beside two vending machines, a place where even the softest voices could be heard. The envelope came on a Thursday. There was no return address, just her name, Grace, written in uneven block letters across the front, the kind of handwriting she hadn't seen in a while, but recognized instantly. She sat at her kitchen table, hands trembling just slightly as she opened it. Inside was a photograph. A boy, no older than 11, stood in a hospital hallway holding a bouquet of bright yellow tulips. His smile was small but real, like it had taken effort, but it meant something. Grace's breath caught in her chest. It was him, Lucas, the boy who used to watch from the corner, the one who had left the first note, the one she thought she might never hear from again. She turned the photo over. On the back, in that same rough pencil handwriting, were 5 words: "You saved my Wednesdays. Thank you." Grace pressed the photo to her chest and closed her eyes. She didn't cry, not right away. First, she smiled, a quiet, grateful, aching smile, because it was never about being remembered, never about being thanked. But knowing that something she did, something so small, had carved out a piece of hope in someone's week, that was everything. She placed the photo on her bookshelf, beside the notebook she still carried to the hospital every week. The pages were nearly full now, each one carrying someone's secret, someone's sorrow, someone's survival, and each one, in its own way, was a flower. Some wilted, some pressed flat, some just beginning to bloom. That Saturday, she walked back to the florist. The tulips were in full season, vibrant and alive. She picked out 3 bunches this time. When the shopkeeper raised an eyebrow, she smiled. "Some weeks," Grace said softly. "You just need a few extra." Because kindness, she'd learned, wasn't measured by how many people noticed. It was measured by the hearts it touched when no one was looking. And now, somewhere out there, a boy named Lucas had proof that even a stranger's quiet gesture could stay with you, long after the flowers were gone.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.